Welcome and a Happy New Year to all of you. Today I will show you a few games which I played in a rapid chess tournament in Würselen on New Year's Day. Before I go into that, let me say a few words about the tournament. The tournament is organized and it has a very nice local familial atmosphere. Food is cheap, the drinks are cheap, and it's a very nice tournament. In this year's edition, we had 4 international masters who joined the tournament and 3 FIDE masters. And in the end, the 4 international masters dominated the tournament, and we finished on the first 4 places. I will show you some of my games from the tournament, and in particular, I will show you the game which decided the tournament victory in the end, and I will start with that. This was the game against the international master Zaitsev, who is a very well-known and strong rapid chess player in our region. I had the white pieces and I was half a point behind, so I really wanted to beat him in order to have a chance at winning the tournament. This is the position. Some moves before I sacrificed 1 pawn to obtain this position, and now it was my turn to move here with white. The first thing that comes to mind now would be to recapture the pawn with a move rook takes f7, but then black has a nice defense by just taking on h4, liberating the rook, and now I'm pretty much forced to take on d7, after which he could, for instance, take on g3 and play queen takes d7 with a pretty solid position and a pawn up. So this would only seemingly win the pawn back. Instead of doing that, I saw an option which was pretty attractive to me because it was an option to complicate the game, and this option was to play the move rook to f6. Yeah, this is a rook sacrifice. I think it's also a pretty strong move. And yeah, first of all, we should take a look at what happens if he takes the rook. But in this case, I get a very strong attack with queen g4 check, let's say king h7. And now different moves like queen h5 or maybe even the simple e takes f6 would win the game. So for instance, if he goes knight g6, I could even reinforce my attack with bishop e4. And it's pretty obvious that the black king is not going to survive this. So now I threaten bishop takes g6, but I also threaten queen to h5. And then to take on h6. So it's clear that black is not going to survive this. So after rook f6, he started thinking for some time, and then he came up with a very creative and very strong move. So he played the move c5. And after c5, I didn't really even see his idea. So I only had very limited amount of time left because each game was just 10 minutes per game. So I had just maybe like 2 or 3 minutes left. And I thought, okay, I should play quickly in order to have some time later on in case I'm able to control the game. So what I did is I took on h6, and this is already a big mistake, which should have cost me the game. But nonetheless, I took on h6. Yeah, so it would have still, for instance, been better objectively to take on f7 or to play some other moves. But bishop takes h6 looked very interesting to me. So here he played the move rook to d4. Again, if he goes g takes h6, I think a simple move like queen g4 would win the game. The strongest move in the position would have been to take on f6, and after rook takes f6, only then to go rook d4, because this would not allow me the following extra option. So now you can pause the video and you can check if you can find a very strong move for white. All right, the solution is very beautiful. The solution is rook takes f7. After rook takes f7, first of all, rook takes e4 doesn't work because of the very nice mating sequence check, another check on f8, and a very beautiful mate on g6. So after rook takes f7, the best move for him in the position would be to take on h6 instead. And yeah, in this position, I could now, for instance, take on f8. So let's say rook takes f8. And now this position still remains very complicated to the human eye, but the computer gives that this attack is lethal. So let's say, for instance, bishop takes f8, queen g6 check, bishop g7, queen e6 check, let's say king h8 and rook f7, and I have a very, very strong attack. Because again, queen e5 does never work because of knight g6 capturing the queen. So after rook f7, he would probably have to give the queen on f7, and my attack would still go on. So another option after rook takes f8 would be to take back with the rook, but this leads to similar lines. Again, queen g6 check, queen h6 check, queen e6 check, queen g6 check, and knight f5. And again, I'm threatening mate. And in case he defends with a move like bishop to d8, then I just have knight to h6, with the idea that he cannot take on f1 because of queen g8 mate. And if he goes something like queen e7, then I can continue and win the queen. So with a winning position thereafter. So the move rook takes f7 would have been the killer blow. But it's very hard to come up with this during the game. So instead of that, after rook d4, I missed this great resource. But instead, I played almost immediately the move queen to e3. Queen to e3 is losing the game, but at least I managed to create some confusion later on. So he took on f6 with the bishop. Again, the right move. And I played rook takes f6. And in this position, probably the easiest solution for black would have been to take on h4, because the main problem which I have is that after rook takes h4, I cannot take back with the pawn, which would be the logical move because of g takes f, and now I'm in this pin here, and this pin is very annoying. So after queen g3, he always has knight g6, and the position is simply lost. So after rook takes h4, I think I would have probably lost the game. But he continued with another move, which also looks pretty natural, which is the move g to f6. The position is still lost for me, and I realized that the position is lost, but I now saw a pretty nice resource, and the resource goes as follows. I took on f8. Here he could again still take on h4 with a winning position, but he played the most naturally looking move, king takes f8. King takes f8 is not a mistake per se, but as you will see, it leads to pretty complicated positions where it's not so easy for him to find the winning sequence. So after queen h6, he played king e8, and I came up with another fancy move, knight to g6. What's the idea? Of course, with knight to g6, I'm threatening queen f8, and the most natural counter, which is to take on g6, would be met by queen h8, and now I can just stay on, let's say, h7 and h8, and I can give checks, and he's not able to run with the king because the c6 square is covered by my bishop on g2. So therefore, this would be a perpetual check with a draw. So after knight g6, he cannot take this knight, and he also had only very limited time left. So what he came up with now is the move king to d7, which is the strongest move, and then I blitzed out the move queen to g7. Again, renewing my threat to attack his king by queen takes f7. And here he made a mistake which a player of his level would never make with more time. So he played the move rook to d8. After the correct move, rook to e8. I could still give one check here on f7. But then after queen f6, king c8, he would be winning. Instead of that, he played the move rook to d8, which is a mistake. I took on f7. He played king c8. Yeah, and now I have a very weird and beautiful perpetual with a knight e7 check, king b8, knight c6 check, king c8, knight a7 check, king b8, knight c6 check. He cannot escape because if he goes to b7, for instance, I can just take on d4 with check, and then I'm even winning because now this is a check, and if he goes there, for instance, I could finish off the game by just capturing one after another, and then I'm just winning. So he cannot escape the perpetual. He played king c8 and offered a draw, which I accepted. Could still have tried with a little bit more time. Maybe I would have done that. The move queen takes e6, after which queen d7 is finally losing because of knight a7 check, which threatens queen b6 check. So the only move he has is king c7, and then knight b5 check is winning the game, because now he's forced to give up his queen. But after queen e6 check, he could just go, for instance, this rook to d7 or the other one, which would force me again to go for the perpetual on a7 and c6. Yeah, so this meant that my game against Zaitsev in the end ended in a draw after lots of turmoil, and it was a very fun game to play, definitely. So now I will show you another key game from the tournament, which was my game against the international master Christian Braun. And in my game against Christian Braun, I had the black pieces, and the game reached the following position, and it was me to move. In this position, I realized if I play slowly, let's say some queen move or some move like h5, then he's going to consolidate his position with rook d5, and then basically I will never be able to win the game. So I thought I have to go for my winning chances, and I played a move which looks extremely risky, namely the move f5. Well, the move looks extremely risky because the white queen can come to the diagonal a2 g8, so to d5, and the white bishop at some point can come to d4, and these two combined might attack my king. Nonetheless, I really wanted to win the game, so I played f5. And the computer here gives e5 also as one option, but I think e5, bishop g7, e6, this looks very computerish because this pawn looks extremely vulnerable, and I think in a human game it's very unlikely that white would go for that. So instead of that, after f5, he went for the natural looking move queen to d3. I took on f4, and now he gave a check on d5. Yeah. So this basically forces me to go king h8, because after king g7 he can just go bishop d4 check, and king h6 is met by queen g5 mate. So therefore, after queen d5 check, I'm basically forced to go king to h8. In this position, this is a position basically which I had to calculate when I played f5, and I saw the following line. So I thought he was going to go bishop d4 check, which I wanted to meet with bishop g7, takes, and now I thought if he takes on e4, I can take back, for instance, with the queen, and I have a rook ending with a pawn up. But it turns out he could go rook b7 check, h6, and now instead of taking on e4, which I had calculated, he could go f4, which threatens queen g5 check, and now I would be forced to go for queen c2, and then after king g1 to play queen c1, queen c2, and again the game would end in a perpetual. So bishop d4 would have been the strongest move in combination with this very strong move, sneaky move f4, which threatens queen g5 mate. So the move which I had calculated a little bit was the move queen to f7, which is another interesting attacking move. And now the point is that I cannot really take on b5. Because if I take on b5, he has a very annoying check on d4. And now if I play rook e5, it's just mate in 1. And otherwise I lose my queen. So I could not take the rook in this case, but I could go for e takes f3, king h2, and now maybe you can try whether you find the correct move for black here. All right, the correct move, I hope you found it, is the move queen to c2. So again, after the move queen takes b5, we have the same issues as before with bishop d4 check, so this is not the correct move. But after queen c2, the bishop cannot move, so bishop d4 check is prevented because I pin the bishop. And at the same time, I'm threatening queen f2, so after queen e8, I would have a mate in 2. Thus, after queen c2, he would be forced to take on f3, and then after bishop g7, now I threaten rook f8, and I'm a pawn up, and I still have a clearly better position. So yeah, queen f7 might look threatening, but also doesn't do the job. So we can already say that bishop d4 would have been the strongest. Queen f7 would probably lose. And he played the third move, which is feasible in the position, which I did not calculate, and this is the move rook to b7. Rook to b7 now threatens queen f7, so I should do something quickly, and I went for the move e takes f3 check, to which he replied just queen takes f3. Yeah, and now in this position I went for the normal move queen to e4, exchanging queens, because in principle my king seems to be more vulnerable here. However, also the tendency of making a draw increases when I exchange queens in this position, so computer gives us the best move, the funny looking queen a2, which protects the f7 square and pins the bishop. Now if white goes queen f6 check, I can just go king g7, and the f7 square is protected by this queen on a2. But I doubt that many human players would have chosen queen a2, because it's very hard to figure that out over the board when you only have 2 minutes left. So instead I played queen e4, exchanging queens, which then should lead to a slightly better endgame, but which should be holdable for white with correct play. So he played the move g4, king g8. Now, since the queen cannot move, so queen f7 doesn't work because his king would then be under attack. So he played rook to d7. And now I should have gone queen e6 and tried to keep the queens on the board. This would have probably given me more winning chances, and given the time situation that I was a little bit up on the time, I should maybe have won the game afterwards. But I didn't do that. I went for queen takes f3 check, simplifying the position, and after king f3 I played the move rook to e7 with a sneaky idea that if he takes, I can win his rook with the check and then taking on d6. But he can now simply transpose to a bishop endgame, where his king arrives in the middle, and now in the next move he's going to go bishop g3 and at some point collect the pawn on f6. And if I go, for instance, king f6 in a position like that, he always has bishop h4 check, and my king cannot really escape this square from h8 to e5, e8, h5. So after king d5, I played h5. He went bishop g3, takes, bishop f8, setting up a last trick that he cannot take, because then the pawn endgame is lost, because I'm going to capture the g4 pawn. So after bishop f8, he had to play a last careful move with g5, bishop e7, bishop takes d6, bishop takes g5, and now the game peters out to a draw, because whenever my pawn moves to the 5th rank, he can just take it with his bishop, or just put the king to g2 and make bishop moves for the rest of the game, and it's just a simple draw. Well, this was the second game, or the part of the second game which I wanted to show you, and now I have a last game from the tournament, which I played against Mark Lamprecht. And in the following position, I would like you to evaluate what happens if black plays the move rook to d2. Okay, you can pause the video. So I hope you found the solution, and the solution is not what I thought first when I arrived there, which is to just go king g6, because this runs into queen c2 check. Yeah, so there is a much cleaner solution after rook d2, and the solution is to play queen f6 check, king g8, and now just king takes h6. And now I'm just threatening queen g7 mate, And if he protects this with rook d7, I have rook e8 mate. Yeah, so rook d2 doesn't work in this position. So instead, he played g takes f4. And now I just want to show you a beautiful geometric motif. And the motif is relatively simple to spot, but I thought it's pretty nice to illustrate. It's queen f5 check. He went king g8, queen g4 check. Now if he goes to the H file, you can already spot the motif. It's rook e8 check. And now the problem is that I will be able to exchange queens under very favorable circumstances at the very least. So for instance, after king h7, I could go rook e7 and transpose to a completely winning rook endgame. Or what happened in the game is he went king g8, queen g4, and now I played king f8. But now I get the same deal again. So I give a check on f4, king g8, king g4 check. Now I cannot give rook e8 check yet because he can take with the king. So I have to give one more check and keep the queen on the same diagonal. So it's beautiful geometry to have all these pieces on the diagonal. And in this position he resigned, because after, let's say, king g8, I have the same motif again, rook e8 check. He cannot take the rook because then I could take his queen. And after king g7, I could just go rook e7 check, king g8, and take on d1 with a completely winning rook endgame, just 2 pawns up for nothing, and his king is cut off. All right, this was the third game which I wanted to show you from the tournament. And yeah, I should maybe say a few finishing words. I would like to thank the organizers for putting this tournament together. As I said, it has a very nice atmosphere because there are not so many players and it's all kind of a familial atmosphere there. And I would also like to congratulate the eventual winner of the tournament, Mikhail Zaitsev. You saw my game against him first. And the guy who came second, Christian Braun, where you also saw parts of that game in this video. In the end, I finished third. I scored 7.5 out of 9, but this was unfortunately only good enough for the third place because I conceded 3 draws, but the eventual winner, Zaitsev, only conceded 2, and the second place, Braun, also conceded only 3 draws, but had a better Buchholz at the end of the tournament. All right, thanks a lot for watching, and please subscribe to the channel. See you around.